KSJE Farmington. San Juan Regional Medical Center is your community hospital, committed to making life better for the communities we are privileged to serve. In fact, better is our mission, improving lives through personalized health and care. What matters most to our patients matters most to us, offering a comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care services so you can get the quality care you need right here at home. San Juan Regional Medical Center, celebrating life better here since 1910. The San Juan County Walk to End Alzheimer's. The walk is full of flowers, each carried by someone committed to ending this disease. When you take part, you're helping raise funds and awareness for a breakthrough in this fight. Join us in Aztec, September 24th at Minium Park for the San Juan County Walk to End Alzheimer's. Visit act.alz.org/walk San Juan County or call 505-278-7927. Twelve minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Wednesday morning, the 24th day of August, 2022. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air here in San Juan County, New Mexico. In Durango, Colorado, you can tune us in at 103.3 FM. And if you're ever anywhere else on the planet, you can listen to us from our website, ksje.com, or ask your smart speaker to play KSJE. Welcome also to our viewers who are watching this visual radio program. The video is streaming out live this morning to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. The topic this morning, math. I'm talking with local author and San Juan College professor Gerald Williams. He has written a new book called Algebra the Beautiful. We'll be talking a little bit about that and his inspiration coming up in the next few moments right here on KSJE. Later on this hour, we'll be checking in with Ron Price, of course, for another important lesson about life in the sandbox. That you'll hear and see at 8:50 a.m. this morning on KSJE. Next hour, Mick Hess is going to be here, roving with the arts, our classical music program. Mick has three great composers lined up for us this morning, including Alan Hovhaness, Mozart, and Samuel Barber. You'll hear music from all three of those composers coming up today on a 90-minute version of Roving with the Arts today at 9:06 on KSJE. That takes us to 10:30, and right on Four Corners, our local and regional author program with Tracy Hales. And Tracy is speaking today with author Chuck Greaves about his book called The Chimera Club. You'll hear more about that coming up today at 10:30 on Right on Four Corners. Don't forget, you can also connect with us on our Instagram page in addition to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And if you're a podcast person, this program, as well as many of the other local programs we produce at KSJE, become podcasts. You can check them out wherever you listen to podcasts, places like iTunes and Spotify, Pandora, and iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. The list goes on and on. Subscribe for free and discover maybe a program you may have missed recently on KSJE. Outside our studios here at San Juan College this morning, it's a partly sunny morning today, 66 degrees at the moment, humidity at 60%. We're expecting today a partly sunny day with a high of 88 degrees, maybe a 20% chance of a rain shower popping up today. A little bit higher chance of rain overnight tonight with a low of 64. 50% chance of showers tomorrow with a high of 84 on Thursday, 63 Thursday night, 83 on Friday. Then again, mostly sunny skies for the weekend with highs in the mid to upper 80s on Saturday and Sunday. Well, let me turn to my guest this morning, who is here to talk about his latest book. Just came out yesterday. Gerald Williams is here, professor of math here at San Juan College. He had you on for your first book a few years ago, but now you're back. That's right. With the second book. Good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Congratulations, too.
Thank you.
The book is called Algebra the Beautiful. That's and it's all about maybe one of the least liked subjects that people have to deal with in school, huh?
That would be accurate.
Okay. And of course, your first book was also kind of, I think, aimed at folks who maybe don't find math to be their favorite topic. It was maybe more geared towards parents of children and things like that.
It was arithmetic. It was it was How Math Works, a guide to grade school arithmetic for parents and teachers. So
that's right.
Trying to talk about how the algorithms of basic arithmetic work.
Exactly.
So this is a continuation of that vein now with algebra.
Okay. All right. And I already warned you that I am not the best math student in the history of my educational career. So,
no worries.
So tell me about the joys of algebra.
Well, I mean, algebra is a very unifying
the word just
subject.
makes some people just kind of cringe. Yeah,
but it's a unifier, and
yes,
and that's one of the things that I try to show in the book is that algebra unifies, particularly a lot of the processes and principles in arithmetic, and a lot of times I don't think students see that. And one of the things with my book and what I try to do in my classrooms, I've always tried to do in my classrooms. And so I've gotten a lot of feedback from my students on that sort of thing, is to show that unifying, show that holistic sort of picture of algebra that a famous mathematician, William Thurston, he talked about math in this way, and used a language analogy, which is sort of like language. People often think of algebra as equations and variable expressions and all that sort of thing, and he likened it to, well, people think about language as sentences and paragraphs and that sort of thing. Well, it's not. I mean, those things are involved in constructing it, but they're actually trying to communicate.
Right.
And that's the same thing with algebra, is the equations and the variable expressions are ways of communicating and expressing things. And so trying to get to that point and get students to see that, takes work, but that's the goal.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And an interesting way to think about it, I think, too, because we don't always think. I mean, I've never thought about it until you've just described it that way, and I imagine you hear that from a lot of people as you bring that up. And being a teacher, I would guess that gives you some unique insights maybe as to how people, your students, react to the lessons, the concepts of different types of math, like algebra.
That's right, yes. And also, I guess the conceptual aspects. I used to... always, when I started, one of the things I wanted to do was really explain that to people, what I loved about math, and do these conceptual lectures, which weren't necessarily specifically about the subject, but it's about ideas and things across the curriculum. And I would do that in my beginning class, my first lecture or second lecture. And after my first 4 years or so of teaching, I was wondering, am I really kidding myself here? I like doing this, but are my students really getting it? But then as I ran into students from earlier classes, the thing they mentioned in the class was those lectures, and then I realized, okay, I'm doing this is getting through to some of them. So,
right,
yeah.
Right. And as a teacher, I imagine that's got to be really gratifying to be able to maybe see those light bulbs pop on.
It's probably the best part of it. Yeah.
As you look out over the class, and maybe all of a sudden somebody's getting it, and maybe the person next to them is getting it, and things and things.
Particularly when people come back, because a lot of times students have been beaten up by mathematics in their earlier years in high school, that sort of thing, and to see them really come back and conquer that's really rewarding.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
For them and in me.
Well, sure, I would think so, for sure. And so that, I'm assuming, then led you maybe to think about writing the second book after the success of the first one, right? Which got some pretty good critical acclaim and some good reviews and things like that.
Yes, yeah, and it gets actually. I think there's a lot, in terms of inertia, in terms of getting started with the book, particularly a first book, and can you really do it? And it takes a while, and how does it fit? And I really was writing I didn't realize the first book I was writing 2 books, and I still have a ton of material from that I didn't use in the first book that I may activate for another book at some point. But once you do it, you feel like you realize you can do it, and that sort of thing. The second one is not as daunting. It's there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still all the usual things, but the in your psyche that you can do it, that has been conquered, and that's a good place to be mentally.
Right. And so I think what you're telling us is there's a third book in you somewhere.
Yes.
You have so much material.
I think there's several more,
coming.
God willing.
Right. As any author, I think it's important to maybe ask a little bit about the process of writing. It's been a few years since your first book, and so I think the pandemic had something to do with that a little bit, but also working with your publisher and getting some ideas from them. I mean, was there kind of a little back and forth there?
Oh, absolutely. When I got a publisher that was interested, of course they wanted to see the. First I gave them several chapters, like 4 chapters,
sure.
and then that's in the process of them deciding if they wanted to take on the project. After that, then I had a couple of manuscript dates. I needed to give them the initial manuscript, and then there would be some editing. My main editor, T.J. Kelleher would go through that, and then it was sort of a global picture what the strategy of the book was, and that came back and it was too long. so I had to take out a couple of chapters, and then he had suggested another chapter as well, and so that aspect, and then that was part of delivering the second manuscript, and then that would be at that point. Then it would go to the. There would still be some editing, but that was the strategic editing, and then it was more line editing and copy editing and proofreading.
Just some small maybe tweaks or something.
Well, they're
right?
big. They're still big in terms of sometimes are you saying this in the right way, that sort of thing. But not the global where you take.
You're not adding chapters and taking away chapters.
Exactly. Understood.
Yeah,
but it was an intense editing process, which is very valuable because I think it made the book better.
Right.
Yeah.
As a writer, though, I mean, I would think that's got to be something to maybe open yourself up to maybe having a publisher or an editor say, your book's great, but it's a little too long. Can we trim a little bit? Can we move this chapter or add this chapter, take this chapter out? I mean, I guess if you want to be published, you've got to be able to accept those types of things.
You do. My, I guess, duties in the college that I did in terms of being involved in faculty organizations and writing things for all the faculty, where when you send emails out and things, you don't want to make a misstep. So I had a lot of editing. I had people look at those things in that case more out of just making sure I didn't make a misstep, which actually prepared me for the editing from the editor. So in that sense, it was my first editor. Really was a massive reorganization, not really the topics, the material, but it was reorganizing the material. And I found that it made it better. And so that makes it easy. Actually, the editing helps. So it's actually very, I think, rewarding. But your ego has to, they're trying to help you and have to realize that that's what they're trying to do.
Sure. Well, and many times I think getting an independent pair of eyes to look at what you've done, whether it's visual or literary or what have you, can really help and see how someone that's not maybe connected to you might react or get what you're trying to say, and hopefully it's still coming through clearly, and if not, they can help you.
And you never know, because you do have. I've had friends and colleagues edit as well, but a lot of times we kind of think the same way. So when it's completely an outer source, that's when it gives you an idea. Okay, how is this going to really come across?
Right.
In that sense, so it's very valuable. It's one of the most valuable parts of the book.
Exactly.
At the late end, but very valuable.
Very true. My guest this morning, Gerald Williams, is here. He is a math professor here at San Juan College. He has written and just published his second book called Algebra the Beautiful, an ode to math's least loved subject, which is kind of sad. I'm sad that we don't like algebra more in this world, but it's just one of those things, right?
Right. Well, there was a big reform in arithmetic. Arithmetic used to be taught in the colleges actually up until and actually into the 1800s.
Sure.
But there was a major reform. It came out of Switzerland and then caught on with the rest of the world. And arithmetic moved into that area where people still struggle with it, but it's still it's accepted now. There's no question about arithmetic in the curriculum. Algebra still hasn't reached that level. That reform, that sort of appreciation still has yet to be accomplished. And one of my goals is to try to aid in that endeavor. It's a massive endeavor.
Is it misunderstood, do you think?
I think algebra has a PR problem, but a major PR problem. But I do think that a lot of the complaints about how it's taught and things are valid.
Right.
It's not. Algebra takes a little bit more work, or a lot of more work, to really kind of show, because it's a second level of abstraction to show how it really is going to. How it fits, and I think we need to do more of that.
And do you get sometimes even from maybe your students that some people are like, well, am I ever going to use this in my life after I leave the hallowed halls of San Juan College? Am I going to use algebra to try to figure something out in my life? Why do I need to take this class?
Yeah, always. And that was the whole goal behind my beginning lectures when I started. When I talked about I would try to give these overviews. That was my whole goal behind that, is to try to I call it kind of taking command of the field right away. When you got students with these negative attitudes and they're in the math class, just kind of knock them over with how this thing is connected and everything like that, and have them view math in a way that they never viewed it before. And then I build on that throughout the course. So it's that beginning is not just window dressing for the rest. I refer back to that material throughout the course. And some of the goal in algebra is to appreciate and understand math, because math, particularly now with data science and such, algorithms dominate our lives in a lot of ways. And the more people that understand a little bit better how that's done, I think is important. But there actually are things that people can do in their lives with the math too, if you look at it in certain ways. Just like I kind of look at it as, in some cases, you might not need the computer. But if you know how to do YouTube searches, you want to learn to do a new process or something, you can look it up and not just refer to it, and that enhances and gives you greater capabilities. And math can do that too. Algebra can do that.
Right.
So that's part of my goal.
Right. And these days, of course, now every kid has a calculator or some type of device to help them. Does that help with algebra, or you still have to know what you're doing, don't you?
You still have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because it. You can't just put something in a box, and particularly with arithmetic, you do need the basic operations. I mean, once we get beyond arithmetic and certain things, you can use the calculator, but you have to have an idea what the answer is giving you. And so some of that has to be internalized in your head. And if you don't internalize that by the mental operations, you're going to suffer because of it. You're going to get crazy answers and not know that they're crazy answers. So that's important as well. So it enhances. I look at it as enhancing. We use a computer, and I use calculators in my classes for certain things because that allows you to handle more messy problems at times as well. But it's more as a tool, not as a supplement.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. So with the book, I want to get back to the book and talk to you a little bit about the book. Your audience for this book, are they math students? Are they non-math students? Are they parents? Who do you think would get the most out of this
all
book?
of the above.
Okay.
Yes, because and actually even math teachers and things, because we can learn from each other. When I read other books, I've gotten ideas.
Right.
In fact, one of the problems that I use at the beginning of the book is called the magical 3-digit numbers, where people put in this put their certain numbers in the problem, and they get a number that's specific to them. The first number is the number of times they like to eat out in a week, and the last 2 digits are their age. I got that from just reading literature and things, and then of course to make it so it works from year to year, I had to adjust it a little bit. But when I tried that out in my classroom, I was amazed at students' response to that. I mean, students really, they were like, wow, and it happened from class to class. And so I said, okay, this problem really resonates. So that was feedback from the class that I got that this kind of, and so I added that to the book, and that was an idea that I got. And so I think by presenting ideas in this way, in my book, I think other people can get ideas and put their own, there's no one way to teach math correctly. I mean, a famous cognitive psychologist, Annual Walkathon, talked about math, teaching education, that sort of thing is more. It's less like something where there's one rigid way, as opposed to maybe like architecture, where architecture you have boundary conditions. You have to obey the laws or certain laws, but then you can build. You can build things in different ways.
Right.
And that's the same thing with teaching. You can teach successfully in different ways. And so getting ideas from each other, I think as teachers talk to each other and things, I think that actually helps, but you can still put your own personality on it.
Right.
And so it has that aspect, but definitely for people, just like when my class, I want students to see algebra in a different light, math in a different light, that it's about ideas and understanding, not about just numbers and equations and such. And that's the purpose of the book. So the biggest audience of the book is those who have negative attitudes towards algebra, trying to change their emotional and conceptual view of the subject, really try to transform it.
Right. And I'm guessing that you teach algebra probably different than how you were taught algebra.
Yes. That's correct.
Very differently?
Well, I mean, the meat and potatoes of it, no. I mean, the meat and potatoes is still a lot of the operations and things, but
sure.
All of the conceptual overview and things, yes. I was a physics major in college, and then as I was, math, you need math for your physics classes. And as I started to take more and more math classes, I had a really great math teacher. My last math would have been my last math class that actually encouraged me to take more, and I did. And then I started reading about it, and then I started reading some of these conceptual books, and then the big picture just clicked in a way. But I had to get to that point to get that big picture. I try to help my students get the big picture. Adding that to it, but I had good math teachers, so there's some differences, but they taught it in a way that I could understand it. So, but I try to build up on that. So
sure. Well, and I think all of education has kind of evolved over the years, and maybe back when you were in college, or I was in college, or other folks. I mean, we were learning more techniques. I think students are learning differently than they did when we were younger, perhaps.
Well, education's an interesting an interesting phenomenon because things come back. It's almost like a revolving wheel or something. There a lot of the stuff that is being talked about now in terms of improving things. Educators talked about in the late 1890s or 1900s. The issue has been often implementation.
Right.
How do we implement it? Because it's hard to implement these things because you got people coming in from different angles. And, it's an abstract subject. And so the implementation has really usually been the problem. I mean, I have some concerns with some of the reforms, some of the things that are happening in education, but then others are, as I said, part of the general picture that we've seen before, and it's just a matter of better implementing them.
Sure. But to teach some of these complicated topics and concepts to a TikTok generation, I mean, does that mean you have to be a little bit different in how you teach it? Or if it's interesting, it's interesting, no matter what the generation.
I think you certainly with as we go along, we have more examples. For instance, in my book, I talk about text messaging and things where, and then try to incorporate that into the class in a way that 20 years ago I probably wouldn't have mentioned. So incorporating those things, but there's some things that are just fundamental in terms of trying to show how things are connected, and
right.
And try to give a holistic picture. That hasn't changed. I think that would have been valuable 100 years ago, and I think that's still valuable now. But definitely the examples and things can change. But I don't think students, at least in my experience, obviously I've only taught I've taught for a little bit more than 25 years, respond to some of the same things as before. So I sometimes think that gets overemphasized, that there's not as much difference
right.
in terms of basic learning.
Well, and the core things that you teach don't change.
Right.
I mean, math is math is math.
Mm-hmm.
It's been math for centuries. I mean,
right.
those concepts
right.
haven't changed, whereas maybe some of the geopolitical world history stuff, that's always evolving and changing and things like that. And those teachers have to be paying attention. But for math, algebra is algebra.
Right. But, again, we do learn from each other, too. So
yes.
we do get examples. So it's not static
sure.
in that sense, too. So as I said in my book, I'm trying to add to that literature and give other people ideas and build off. I think we teach best when we learn from each other.
Right.
Instead of fighting each other, which often happens too.
I hear you. That's very true. So going back, why do you think algebra is the least loved subject? Is it just because of these concepts and some of the things that just maybe aren't readily apparent to students trying to learn it?
Well, it's partly because it's required.
Yes. Yes.
And it's that first level of abstraction. Really, I mean, arithmetic, people can understand numbers, and they've actually had experience with numbers, and they use them more. So in that sense, algebra is that big hurdle, and I liken teaching algebra, any education, to let's say a high performance plane. If you do it right using the optimal conditions, then you can get amazing things out of it. But if you don't follow the procedures and things, it can stall and you can have catastrophic failure. And unfortunately, a lot of times in algebra, we end up having some catastrophic failure or partial failure because of not being more cognizant of that there's an emotional aspect to it as well, and it's really a conceptual hurdle that students need to see how it's connected to something, connected to what they've done before and connected to other things and ways, and I think it's possible to do that. But because that's not sometimes not done in large enough number, and because so many students are exposed to algebra, calculus people find hard too, but not everybody takes calculus. So because algebra, pretty much the entire population takes algebra, and a lot of folks don't have success with it, they have frustration with it. I think that's why.
Sure. I hear you. And I guess maybe just because, as you're doing a calculation with algebra and you make one small error, it messes up the result. And we know what the result should be. And I'm sure it's frustrating maybe for students who are trying to figure out how to get that result when they're doing their calculations, but they're just forgetting a couple of things. And you get that catastrophic failure like you mentioned, I suppose.
Well, in that sense, it depends on the problem. That's why I ask students to show their work, because sometimes students may make an arithmetic error, but they've done everything else correctly. Mm-hmm. They show they understand equations, but one little thing messes up. Now, obviously, they can't get the full credit for that, but they still understand what's going on in a sense. So it just depends, and in some cases, there's huge gaps in the conceptual understanding, and then everything kind of breaks down in that sense. So there is a difference,
right?
And, and I do grade. I do give partial credit when I grade because it depends on the type of mistake and the conceptual if they're understanding in that sort of way. So, but I mean, I think sometimes students do think it's just right or wrong, and in terms of that, and that's part of the frustration. And don't get me wrong, right answers are important. So because if you're doing things, you need to use the right answer. So I'm not saying that they aren't, but it is about understanding and changing your viewpoint and seeing how things connect as well. And so it's a more holistic picture.
Sure.
So I try to get students to think about things more in that way, in the hopes that they can appreciate the subject. Because I think appreciation is important too, not just understanding the material, which is very important, but also appreciating how it connects and having a better attitude towards it. So people, when the word algebra comes up or the word math comes up, they have a less negative response.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I guess the process is what we're talking about too, right? Mm-hmm. That's important. As you ask them to show their work, you can hopefully follow along with their process to see, you're doing great until this step, and then this is where we lost you.
That's right.
And then you came up with this answer, and if you'd done this differently, this would have been the answer.
Yes, and we do a lot of problems in class. I do a lot of problems. I have them do problems, and I do my problems freeform. I don't work off of a script, and I write it down from the start, and they can see what I'm doing. And once in a while you do make a mistake, and students point that out, and they're engaged. So you get that back and forth, and so I think that's what I'm trying to build is that process. And I try to do that in the book as well,
right.
if possible. But I mean, the book is it's a different venue than the classroom, so you can't. I don't do nearly as many problems as I would in the classroom.
Sure.
In that sense.
Not as much back and forth in a book.
That's right.
As you have in the classroom, for sure. Now,
Yeah.
Is there a favorite chapter in the book, Algebra the Beautiful, when you think about it?
I have a few.
Okay. Can you share one or two with us?
Well, one of the chapters where I talk about, it's called Convergent Streams and Emergent Themes.
Okay.
It's my fourth chapter, where I introduced the very important notion of parameters, which I think gets the short shrift in algebra education. But parameters are really what took algebra from, shall we say, sort of a provincial discipline to the worldwide discipline it is now, in a sense. And that's in a conceptual sense, because it really opened the subject. And that really happened in the 1590s is when parameters were introduced, and they really took off by a French mathematician, Francois Viette. And then, of course, they were further developed in the 1600s. And but a lot of times that's not the focus. Or that's not enough of that doesn't get enough attention. It's more equation. Equations get the lion's share of attention in elementary algebra, which they're very important, but the variable expressions and the parameters are very important as well. So that chapter, I introduced that through a business example of a small business that is producing hamburger meals.
Okay.
So that's one of my favorites.
Right.
I think chapter 6 and 7, where I talk about the educational ecosystem of algebra, which I think is important too. You can't just talk about the subject without a little bit of history of education and people's attitudes towards it. So I like those. And then my chapter 8, where I kind of tie some things, and I think there's some stuff that's really useful in there. It's called let's see, the algebraic awareness. This is the 7th chapter. This is Algebra Uncloaked.
Okay. Is
chapter 8, and it's a big feature in there is what's called quantitative cocktails, where I talk about I liken taking averages and things to like mixing drinks and cocktails, and that I think that's a very powerful metaphor, and also it applies to various things from calculating slugging percentage, figuring out ratings, doing GPAs, all that stuff is connected in the same way. Even college rankings and things use these things I call quantitative cocktails. The official name for them is weighted averages. Mm-hmm. But I think the cocktail metaphor actually adds to that. So those are among my favorites, and I enjoy the last chapter as well. But all of them are obviously I love. But
of course.
But yeah, there are some.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, and they can help the audience and help people understand algebra more than maybe they do already. And if they don't already love it, maybe they'll learn to love it through your book.
That's the hope. That's the hope. Or have at least somewhat of a different attitude, change their attitudes. I often tell my students, I know I'm not going to turn them into mathematics evangelists after the class, but if I have them have a little bit better respect for the subject, an attitude towards the subject, then, as well as learning the material for what they need, then I've achieved my goal. And that's sort of my goal here too.
Very good. The book is Algebra the Beautiful, written by our own San Juan College professor of math, Gerald Williams. We're out of time, but thank you for coming in this morning. I know it's available wherever books are sold, as they say, right?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
It's all over the place.
At the publisher website. It's Barnes & Nobles, all those, and actually in bookstores as well.
Okay.
So
congratulations to you.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
Great to have you here.
Uh-huh.
Take care. That's Gerald Williams, my guest here on KSJE. KSJE is proud to support the Summer Terrace Concert Series, Saturdays at the Farmington Museum. Saturday, August 20th, Rock, Blues, and Country with Black Velvet. Saturday, August 27th, Jazz with Didat. The Summer Terrace Concert Series at the Farmington Museum, 3041 East Main Street, Saturdays this summer from 6 to 7:30 p.m. KSJE is proud to support the San Juan Medical Foundation's 42nd Annual Walkathon, Saturday, September 17th. The Walkathon is the Foundation's premier annual event, the fundraising effort that supports the Connolly Hospitality House and the San Juan Medical Foundation's mission of enhancing the health and well-being of people in the Four Corners community. Register to walk, sponsor a walker, or make a donation at sanjuanmedicalfoundation.com.
Newborns all over the country get